And I want to talk about some of this impact and President Biden struggling in particular with younger voters, and as we know, very much so with Arab American voters, Muslims here in the U.S. as well. How deep is the frustration in the community right now?
Thank you for having me on. 7 months and counting, the frustration is very deep. I think the community is horrified, particularly by what we're seeing unfolding in Rafah. But it's really beyond the Arab and the Muslim electorate. This is a national sentiment. The majority of U.S. voters, survey after survey, is showing, certainly within Democratic affiliations, and even a slight majority among Republicans believe that there should be a ceasefire in Gaza. And in fact, at least on the Democratic side, the majority of respondents believe that there absolutely should be conditions on the weapons that are going to Israel that are being used to commit violations of international law.
Yeah, that is certainly reflected in some of the polling that we just mentioned, Wa'el. The Biden administration has changed its tone on the war in recent weeks in particular. We saw President Biden threaten to suspend offensive weapons to Israel if it were to go through with an operation in Rafah. How do you think that has changed how some people see the U.S. position? Some people have been frustrated in particular.
Well, I think it's a necessary first step that the, quite frankly, anti-war movement has been calling for now for many months. And people want to believe that this is the beginning of the road toward accountability vis-a-vis the Netanyahu government. But even the suspension, as welcome as it is, of this single shipment of arms was followed by a release of a report by Secretary of State Blinken, whereby the U.S. administration balked at making a determination that the Israeli government and its military have been in violation of U.S. domestic and international humanitarian law. They had an opportunity to send a clear signal with this withholding of this single shipment. And I'm afraid they really backtracked. And any goodwill vis-a-vis the electorate, I think, was missed.
I want to ask you particularly about that report because you did previously work, as we mentioned, at the State Department. Why do you think that this report appeared to come down on both sides without reaching a conclusion?
Because I really think the administration is looking at this as a political or policy problem, and now this is a legal problem. You have irrefutable evidence that Israel has committed war crimes with U.S. weapons, targeting civilian infrastructure, targeting civilians themselves, aid organizations and organizers with U.S.-made bombs. And U.S. law is very clear on the misuse of U.S. weapons by third parties, and there are laws on the books not saying nothing of international law. And therefore, the administration is trying to perhaps maintain its access, relationships, influence, whatever that may be left of that with the Netanyahu government, while dancing around this very clear legal question. And I think for everyone who is not just reading the reports, just seeing what is happening, there's that contradiction, and they really have to make a decision. They can no longer play it both ways.
Well, we know that at least earlier on the conflict, you were part of some of the community who met with President Biden, spoke with White House officials. Now, as you said, more than 7 months in, what message do you need to hear from President Biden and his administration, do you think?
You know, there's been, as you mentioned, a change in tone. The president himself told the Israeli prime minister several weeks ago that he wants to see a ceasefire soon. He has said himself that he believes that the Israelis are using U.S. weapons to kill Palestinian civilians in his explanation of why he would want to withhold offensive weapons. What needs to happen now are actions. There needs to be a clear determination that indeed the Israelis are violating international law and U.S. domestic law. I think the certain offensive weapons that are being used in Rafah and elsewhere, these heavy bombs and other munition, needs to be suspended indefinitely. And there needs to be more political pressure by the administration, both bilaterally and at the UN, therefore removing our threat of veto to ensure that the Israelis bring these operations to a halt, certainly in Rafah and elsewhere, and allow more credibly way more humanitarian assistance into the Strip.